facilitate your site, and that would make more.
Yes, that, I mean, that's my thing. It just be endless and completely open. It's crazy.
All right, guys, we're going on in a second. You're aware? K2, can you hear us okay?
Yep, I can hear you just fine.
Awesome, great. Are we ready?
Hear his presentation.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to our October 3rd, 5:30 p.m. work session. As a reminder, for everybody and people who might be listening, we will not be having a regular council meeting tonight, so we get to go home a little early tonight, which is nice. We have two items on the agenda tonight for our work session. First is a discussion of the Sherwood West UGB expansion proposal, which is an ongoing conversation and staff committed to coming back to us tonight. So thank you for coming. And then Chief Hanlon is here to talk about police policy for the second time. So with that, Keith, did you want me to kick it to you or just straight to Eric?
Mr. Mayor, I think you go ahead and lead it straight to Eric there.
Eric, you're ready to go, right?
Mayor Rosemary.
Mayor Rosemary, yes.
I'll make that mistake. All right, so yeah, this is our second work session on the UGB expansion question. Just to remind you where we were, where we're going. So September 5th of this year, we talked about the expansion process. There was various questions for Metro during that process. We talked about public engagement, what information you guys would like from the community or what we should be sharing with the community. And then we got just a little bit into the annexation policy. Tonight, we're going to talk in more detail about master planning, how that relates to the concept plan, how it relates to middle housing, et cetera. We'll talk about annexation policy and then also middle housing as well specifically. Tomorrow night, we'll have the community open house, Bridges Elementary School, 5:30 start.
5:30.
We'll start at 5:30. We'll have a very small program. I think it starts at 6. So I'll do a really brief presentation overview of the concept plan, have the mayor give a few comments, and then we'll get the feedback. We're going to keep it really simple.
Was that clear in the announcement that there would be something at 6? I thought it said 5:30, 7:30.
5:30 to 7:30. So we're
You probably gonna go that rest that?
yeah, but we'll have all that information available.
Okay.
So
Cause I didn't catch that in the announcement.
Yeah, so basically we have one questionnaire, basically. So anyone who comes through the door, we want them to fill out that questionnaire. 6 is just, that's 6 o'clock, just a little more formal. We'll just say a few words and then get into small groups and basically have a facilitator facilitate that questionnaire and just get into a little more detail. Or whether you come at 5:30 or 7 o'clock, staff will be there to walk you through that questionnaire. So that'll be the format.
Is the questionnaire already published?
No.
Yeah, if you can send that out, that'd be great.
Very simple, very straightforward. Basically, just what do you like about the plan? What do you dislike? And then what areas should be brought into the urban growth boundary and why, if any?
Will there be any visuals about what the area might look like?
Yes, we'll have the poll. We'll have mixed employment.
And is there any, this is a question, but I know Councilor Stout and I talked about potentially the opinions being worth more if they've been a little bit informed on the thing. Is there any desire to maybe give them the questionnaire by the moderators, or you know what I mean? So it's not being filled out and then they're leaving before you're.
So we're going to have the boards up and it can be go at your own pace, right? So they can make their way around. Here's the transportation element. Here's the land use element. Here's the environmental element to the plan. They could go through the whole open house and then fill out the questionnaire if they like.
Okay.
If they know the concept plan well, they can just fill it out and
Is
hand
there
it to us.
staff station that the different stations that?
Yep.
yes.
The questionnaire includes some demographic information, so we know if it's a resident or
Yes.
Yes.
a developer or a landowner.
We'll know whether if they answer truthfully, we'll know whether so not who they are, but we'll know whether they live in city limits, Sherwood West, or outside both of those. Okay, any other key demographics you're looking for?
I just want to make sure we understand how to interpret it, because those meetings tend to have outside oversized participation from some groups. So I just want to make sure we have a good.
Are we also asking if there's if they have any interest in the area outside of, you know what I mean, like financial interest or anything like that?
We can ask if they are a property owner or have a property in contract. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, that's what.
We have that? Sure.
And again, it's only a truthful answer, so.
True.
Yeah.
It's not a scientific,
I'm gonna give.
Definitely,
Yeah.
right.
On something.
Yeah, so within, it really would be within Sherwood West that you're interested in, right? Not if they're a property owner in city limits, obviously.
Right.
Yeah, that's.
Okay. Anything else for the open house? Questions or comments? Okay, so we'll see you there at between 5:30, 7:30 tomorrow. And then we have the first meeting in November. We have another work session scheduled here. We will process all of the engagement feedback that we got, give you the results ahead of time. We'll get it to you as soon as possible, of course. And then that's really the big night in terms of, direction from council to staff. And so I think tonight, as we go through this presentation, if there's any other information you guys would like between now and then, have a full another month. So we're happy to get you guys whatever information is needed. And then on December 5th is when the plan is to. So
December 1st.
no, I'm sorry, December 1st.
It's fine. I think we covered this in the letter of interest. The official ask isn't until April. Right. That letter of interest, if we're just not done evaluating and say we're interested, but we don't have a lot of details for it yet, that's
Right.
enough. We
Yes.
don't have to include any details. at
It
that
does
point.
not bind us to the full application in any way.
Yeah, I was aware of that. I just make sure that there wasn't like a minimum requirements for information at that point.
No, I think this first LOI it's very early, very, very high level. I mean,
It's high level. They would like to see, an estimated number of acreages for employment and housing land, but if we don't have it, we can just talk about the plan in general.
Okay, good.
Oh, what's nice, and maybe you'll get to it, it's Metro clarified in their responses that you can cancel the request at any time. I mean, they hope we
of
wouldn't,
course,
but you could.
It's just a lot of work on staff's part to put the formal request together. So we gotta
Exactly.
make sure we're really committed before we go down that path.
and I apologize, I didn't introduce, we have Carrie Richter with us, legal counsel for land use, and everyone knows Erica, of course. So both city council and planning commission, Chair Gene have asked a number of questions about Sherwood West, sort of how all this plays out in terms of the planning and development phases. So we've proposed and answered these three questions, but if you guys want to drill down into more detail or you have other questions, feel free. That's what these work sessions are for. So first question, can cottage cluster and middle housing only zones be created in Sherwood West? What are the benefits of a city-led master plan for portions of Sherwood West? And how is HB 2001 for middle housing implemented through a master plan? And then how can annexation agreements or policies be used to best achieve the city's desired outcomes for Sherwood West? So we'll answer those three questions. And then the last work session, information was also requested, a vacant residential land map showing all the vacant residential land in the city, a development phasing map, very, very high level, but just kind of shows that we're thinking about how this area will develop in an orderly fashion. And then also there was procedural questions, really for Metro. City staff doesn't want to speak for them, so they've responded to those questions. That was in the packet.
One on question number one, can we also talk about hospitality zoning?
Sure. So here's the vacant residential land map. Green is residentially zoned properties.
Zoom in on that.
Sure. quality's not great, but green is residentially zoned vacant and red is commercially zoned vacant. If it's developed, it's not, or mostly developed, it's not on here. So in terms of residential, we do have a few infill properties. This would be the church site here. We have one in Old Town. We have a few off of Edie Road and a few on the east side or west side here off of Elwood. And then of course the Elks property here. Those would be, I guess we call them infill. Some of them are at the boundary, but mostly infill vacant properties. And then really where a lot of the vacant residential comes in, of course, is in the Brookman. So most of our vacant residential land is to the south within the Brookman addition. In terms of commercial, we do have mainly, of course, off Highway 99, which is where our commercial property is. Nice stretch of vacant commercial here on both sides. And then we have a few on the north side of 12th and Sherwood Road. So in terms of
What's that red spot in the middle there?
This one here?
Yeah.
this is just next to it's terrible qualities. It's right next to the police station.
That's what I thought, okay.
Okay.
I didn't know that was commercial.
Police station.
Yep, vacant commercial is privately owned.
Yeah. So, yeah. It's not currently built out, right?
Correct, vacant.
Thank you.
And then this is very, very approximate, just back in napkin analysis and GIS, but about 1,400 units in our residential zones. And if planning commission, city council were to approve residential in the commercial zones, you have capacity for about 900 units within the commercial zones, but that requires following the code, of course, land use approval.
How many housing units do we have today, roughly?
Ooh, on top, I'm not sure. So we have
5,600 or something?
what's our household size?
6.
So then it'd be around.
I heard 6,700 thrown around.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. off the top.
The number that comes to my head is like 6,600.
Yep, thanks, Keith.
That feels a little dated though, because I feel like I've been hearing that number for like 3 years now. And I know there's been some development.
number?
So the 6,600 I've been hearing for like 3 years now. So
But
anyway,
even if it's 7,000, we have room to grow 20%. On
Yeah.
the city limits, just in the residential areas.
and most of that 1,400, I assume is in Brooklyn, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
of course. And then very, very simple map and high level, but basically just showing based on location and physical attributes and location of utilities, what areas are likely to develop first. And so dark areas would develop before the lighter areas. And I think this is just to show that when we talk about annexation and we talk about orderly growth, that there's a method to it, right? We're looking at existing improvements, we're looking at a lot of different factors that go into it. And I'll just say we did a similar approach for the Tonkin employment area, and that has played out almost exactly how we expected it to. And it's really not complicated. The areas along your arterials and collectors are going to go first. They have access to the roads and the utilities. And then you get more closer to the middle in the Tonkin employment area is what happened. That was a little bit different because it was surrounded by the roads. This one, we're just going west. And so properties to the east are going to develop sooner than properties to the west. That's just how
The
it's gonna go.
infrastructure is going to drive that.
Exactly. That's exactly. Yep.
I hate to throw the last minute kink in the works here, but did we talk at all about Sherwood North? Is part of the ask?
No, and it'd be way too late. Along Highway 99. Yeah, they're out of the question for the ask. Yeah. And I know that this group is fairly familiar with the process, but there are maybe others who are not. So we have an accepted concept plan, of course. Right now, we're talking about whether or not to do a UGB expansion proposal. If you make an ask and if Metro approves it, the next step would be comprehensive planning. And again, Metro is going to fund that fully. It's not whatever we ask for and they approve. So that's when we get into the details of what's the zoning going to be. Do we need new zones or do we carry over our current zones? We'll develop the development code. What are the allowed uses in all of these areas? We will update all of our facility plans, our sewer master plan, water master plan, parks master plan. All of that needs to be updated as part of the comp planning process. And we'll also work on, if you guys would like, updated annexation policy as part of the comprehensive plan as well. And then,
So, hold on.
Yep.
So with them funding it, does that
compel us to listen to, like, if they say, hey, you need X, Y, and Z funding, do we have to do X, Y, and Z, or if not funding, zoning? Do we have to do that, or do we say, hey, you know, we only want X and Y zoning?
Meaning if
You know what I mean? If they're funding the study,
Right, right.
are we then
They don't get a say.
be held to that study? Right?
Because they're metro and they have their own ordinances that cover us, they already have a say. So to speak, it's the fact that they're funding us gives them no additional.
No additional, okay, all right.
Yeah, I mean, and the response did say that they could condition the ask with certain conditions.
So we
So,
didn't know that before we did our, I mean, that, we'd know that before we did our plan.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
If they condition the ask, we could pull the ask, or we could, or we
Yeah.
would know in the comprehensive
Well, I
plan.
guess the root of what I'm asking is, we're not giving up any,
By them funding it.
yeah, by them funding it, we're not giving up any sovereignty.
I don't.
Okay.
No.
They funded quite a bit.
Right, no, I'm fine having them pay for it, I just didn't want it to come with strings attached, is essentially what I'm getting at, okay.
The strings are already there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna come in other areas, with the funding, yeah.
Okay.
So on the order of operations here, the annexation policies and agreements and whatever ordinances we have to put in place with that. I feel like that we need to do that before comprehensive planning, only because we don't know what Salem's gonna do in terms of how annexations can be, can happen. And having those agreements in sooner than later, I think is a better idea. Unless I'm missing something here.
So you're saying you want to have the annexation code in place before you do the comprehensive
Or at
plan?
least.
I would word it, I want to have the annexation code updated and in place before anyone could possibly apply for annexation.
Yes.
Thank you.
100%, that,
Yeah.
that is, yes, I don't think there's any worry there. You know, a property owner could not apply to annex until we're completely done with that comprehensive planning category, which
And
includes,
unless
which
Salem
includes
does
annexation
something.
policy.
And I would
Yeah.
think even if we had annexation policies in place and Salem did something, they could force us to change our policies. They seem to like to do that.
Well, you were thinking about amending your annexation policies anyway.
Yeah.
Generally,
Yeah,
across
I
the
mean,
board. So
we-
why
yeah.
wouldn't you just do that in the next 6 months?
That's an ask.
And so you'll have new annexation policies that just apply citywide, and then you are ready when you get your you can go forward with your comprehensive planning for Sherwood West specifically.
Yeah, we could do that, and you know, if we need to update it. When we actually get to this step with Sherwood West, that's fine too. We can, you know, so we have draft annexation policy. It's modeled off some other jurisdictions around here that we think have strong annexation policy. And we can get into that in the next few months if you guys would like and see how it worked out. You know, it would probably, the biggest impact would be to the Brookman area if we did that now. But I think that's, if you guys would like to do that, we have the authority, you guys can do that. So.
Yeah, that was my question, is what's prohibiting us from working on that now versus later?
Just workload.
But I think that in Eric's, sorry, I think in Eric's chart, when he says annexation, I think he's talking about a specific proposal.
Oh,
And we were looking at the annexation policy under the comprehensive planning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but the annexation big green square, I think
That's like
in this is like an application.
An actual application,
Okay,
right?
That's
So
how I read it, yeah.
you guys set the policy here under comp planning, and then we get an actual application, right?
Gotcha.
And then,
well, just to be clear, the reason I brought up that urgency and we need to reprioritize, obviously it's a workload issue, but. In the last session with 3414, they tried to circumvent that whole planning process and create a policy where you can just bring land in.
Mhm.
So I think that's still being looked at for this short session, so we just need to be ready for it, that's all. Yeah.
I would be in favor of updating our citywide annexation policy as soon as it's practicable, and then we can always tweak it through the comp plan process if we need to.
Yeah, I would be in agreement with that as well.
Yep. Yeah, because you may want policy that's specific to Sherwood West, right? Or
Yeah.
to address any issues there, so. And then. Between comp planning and annexation, the city can choose to go through a master planning process. And so there'd be similar, I think the most recent example in the area is Rock Pond 2. Wilsonville did a master plan for that and adopted it in 2017. And we'll get into, what that means if you guys would like to do that. But I think generally it gives the city more ability to regulate land uses and parks and open space and that type of thing, and try and ensure that we're going to get what we're looking for in Sherwood West. So, and then after that, after annexation, you'd get the development.
I have a question about that. I'm definitely interested in that. I'm also curious about. Like Villaball was more of a developer-led master plan or a partnership at least. Is that also an option? But I mean, obviously you gotta find a partner.
We can look into that. I don't know. So, a developer can also lead a master plan. And that would require approval from the city still, right? It would still require city council approval. Do you have any thoughts on how that might change things? We can get back to them.
Well, let's move
That's fine.
forward in the discussion and we'll circle back around
Put
to,
that out there, sure.
yeah.
Sure. So the first question, can cottage cluster and middle housing only zones be created in Sherwood West? Answer to that is yes. And we've talked with DLCD staff about the first two questions. And it was one of their housing managers and also our local rep for DLCD was on that call. So basically the response was, since HB 2001 only requires middle housing to be in your single family zones, it doesn't go the opposite way, that if you have a middle housing only zone, that then you also have to allow single family. The answer to that was no. And so we are treading new water from what they've said. There aren't any cities that have middle housing only zones. But so Sherwood might be the first, unless one of these other areas does it through their zoning first.
People will be pleased with that though, because that's what we're missing. That's what everyone's missing.
Yeah, and frankly, if I buy a house in a middle housing place. I'm not surprised if middle housing goes in next door, you know what I mean? And so it feels like you're getting what you're paying for, but my other comment on that is, can you have separate design standards then for middle housing zones?
Yes.
Or is, okay.
They
perfect.
have to be clear and
They have
objective.
to- Right, but so the planning commission would then come back and say, all right, here's what we want for.
We currently have a design standard that would apply.
Yeah.
But if we want-
For the middle house, okay,
Yes.
but that's in the other zone, right?
No, it's citywide.
It's
regardless
just
of-
middle housing and cluster zone,
Oh,
cluster
okay.
design standards.
I mean, you could have specific design standards for different types, but
Okay, because I thought that was only applying for if you were putting middle housing on a single family home. Okay, all right.
Yeah, of course, we recommend it. Of course, I recommend strong architectural design standards,
Yeah.
orientation standards and all of that. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, and you can develop all of that. And that would be the comprehensive planning phase.
Yeah, I think
zoning.
I'm definitely in favor of these zone types. I do think because we're pioneering, we need to be careful about not going too far down there. I mean, because ultimately the economics matter and supply and demand matters. And if we say, you know what, let's put cottage cluster zones everywhere and they don't develop, so there's a balance. We'll have to find out.
and part of our opposition to HB 3414 in the long session was that the original variation of that bill could basically, a developer could come in and take a cottage cluster zone and through variances, make it into anything they wanted, basically.
Yeah.
I brought that up with the governor's office in my last meeting, and they were very sympathetic to making sure that we can have these types of zoning types.
Yeah, that's
So,
great. And other
yeah.
jurisdictions have the same thing. Their code right now requires middle housing. Certain percentage of this development has to be middle housing.
Right.
And 3414 would have allowed the developer to do just single family, which contradicted the state goal. So the answer to this is yes. And just to give you an example, I mean, you guys are familiar with this, but we do have cottage cluster and middle housing zones, just west of the high school. So good news is the answer is yes to this question. I won't go over this again, just we're going to get into the master plans, just pointing out where in the process we'd actually do the master plan.
I'm sorry, Eric. Did you happen to speak to them about the hospitality?
We did not talk about hospitalities.
Earlier conversation.
Yeah, we can add that if you want. We can add that before the next work session. So the answer to the question, actually just going back here, what are the benefits of a city-led master plan for Sherwood West and how is HB 2001 implemented through a master plan? The state did adopt administrative rules, so they have OAR say exactly how, if you are doing a master plan, how a local jurisdiction can regulate middle housing that's outside of the normal parameters, right? They adopted HB 2001, they did really detailed code. When we did our update in 2021, we followed that really detailed code for middle housing that applies citywide. But we don't have any adopted master plans that sort of modify those regulations at all, but the OAR allows for that. And so basically we can regulate location, design, that type of thing outside of this full code, this full law that they've adopted. And we have some discretion within a master plan process. The key is that we check one of these three boxes. And it's up to us if we want to do this and which box we check. First one is to provide urban services to accommodate 20 units per acre within the master plan area. So just the specific master plan area.
What do they mean?
So that means like sewer, water.
Sewer, water, roads.
It doesn't, we don't have to allow, we don't have to zone it for 20 units per acre.
We should probably clarify that, or do you have a response to that, Carrie, or should we clarify?
It says you plan it to accommodate at least 20 dwelling units per acre. So I think that means that you plan it for 20 units per acre. But that's your total master plan area.
Yeah.
That's not what I.
That's not how I read that.
That's not how I read it at all. Pick one of those three.
One of those three, yeah.
One of those three, and we're just talking about the first one.
Okay.
So if we don't want to do that.
The first one is not what you're gonna do, where you have to, we're just telling you what the list is.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So other options, implement a variable rate system development charge for middle housing within the master plan community. So the theory and concept, we have a lower rate for middle housing because the unit is smaller, the impact and system is smaller, and so.
We already do that.
Let's see.
I mean, don't we have variable rates? I know Clean Water Services does based on like. No.
I'm not sure. We can look into that.
The rates are the same. The rates are the same. It just ends up being lower because you have a smaller number of
That
toilets or whatever.
the idea is to incentivize the development of middle housing, so.
I can check.
But it
that.
doesn't say exactly how much you have to incentivize it, but the idea is to have a variable rate infrastructure fee to incentivize the development of middle housing.
Yeah, well, and to make it worth it financially, right? It's got to make sense financially to develop this kind of housing so that. People will, right?
Well, I think this is the intent here is to lower the price of these units so that they're more
Right.
affordable.
Yeah.
And I'd say, Councilor Scott, it's also to address your comment earlier about middle housing of making sure that it actually, there's some incentive
And
there.
it gets built.
Yeah, but we can't-
It doesn't stay empty.
But we can't do like, I mean, it's not like a pass through, right? We can't say, hey, we're knocking 10,000 off your STC, so you better knock 10,000 off the price, right?
What just happened?
That's
really.
Yeah,
No, and that's out of our control.
That's,
yeah, that's out of our control. I'm just wondering if there's.
Unless there's the.
Market driven.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
The market
Market
side.
happen unless we do that.
Right.
There's
We haven't-
insurance
haven't.
market rate
Yeah,
for the house, there's no.
okay.
And then the third option is to require a mix of residential types, including at least 2 middle housing types other than duplexes. So
That one seems
That's easy.
reasonable. Yeah.
Condos,
easiest one
townhouse,
to-
dwellings.
So what is that?
Quadplexes, triplexes,
Oh.
Townhouse,
apartments,
townhouses.
towns.
So what I don't see in this is. It going the other way. So to me, the intent of doing master plan is saying like, okay. We're gonna master plan this, we're gonna say, here's all the. Middle housing zones. And these ones are single family, and it doesn't seem like. Where that overrides. HB 2001, like they could still do middle housing in the single family zone too.
It's a great.
Is that correct?
No,
Okay.
not in your master planned community zone. So you're gonna have your map and you're gonna have a circle around your master planned community. And so those zones are gonna have a special MP label at the end of them. So maybe you have a cottage cluster zone that's outside your master plan community and it's just COTT, and then inside you have COTTMP. Right, that's a master planned place, and that is what is going to count towards qualifying for that, for one of those options. And when you do one of those options, you can have single family residential zones as long as you allow duplexes.
There'll be single family.
Single family only, no middle housing in that zone.
But they can still build a duplex.
They can do the duplex that's all.
Yeah, that to the last point, the minimum master plan area has to be 20 acres in size. I don't think there's a problem there. And then we have to allow duplexes anywhere. That's just everywhere, single family, you have to allow duplexes.
But not triplexes or
Correct.
Correct. Or cottage
So the
cluster.
best we could do with this is say. This lot is single family, this lot's single family, this lot's cottage cluster, this lot's townhome, this lot's duplex within the master plan area. But we can't prevent the single family from being built as duplexes. If we do that.
Correct. Correct. So I think, in terms of us, in terms of the city really, planning out an area and getting what we want, I think in terms of middle housing and the concern around HB 2001, I think it's a pretty good response.
And then when we do that, then. We're the ones who are saying, here's where the roads are, here's where the parks are.
Yes.
And we can, then that is like, see, that to me is the value, right? If I can say the park is gonna be here. The road is gonna go here, this is the size of the lot, like that's where I get excited.
Yeah.
Then we can really build what the vision is that we spent all this time. Building in the concept plan.
Can somebody explain what a downside of a master plan would be?
Workloads.
The workload, you have to do, the whole idea. In comprehensive planning, you're the first one to go out there and decide where the roads are gonna go. That takes engineering. You gotta know where the slopes are, you gotta know what the soils are, you gotta know, there's a lot more. Upfront work from the local government side when you are gonna do that kind of work, but you have more control.
Time and cost.
Does it also make it so that, hey, we've designed this thing and now it's not financially feasible?
It could.
Yeah, and so then we don't get what we wanted and what our
Oh,
vision
it just
was.
doesn't develop, because.
Right.
If the developers
Yeah.
don't like, the plan, if the master plan that we put in place is one that. That developers don't see the market value in comparatively to
Yeah.
other places they can develop, then yeah, might develop more slowly. Or
There's also a chicken and egg effect.
Sure.
Just an extreme example, if the land is zoned, public institutional, you're not gonna be able to sell it for much as if it's zoned something else. So if we do a master plan and it's zoned a certain way, that's gonna drive
Market price for land as well.
Right, but do you think that if we're paying for the engineering and the pre-work and everything, it seems like to a developer, they would say, hey, I don't have to foot that bill. I could, you know what I mean? Like I could.
Partner with the developer and they take some of the costs that the UGB trade that Tiger did.
Yeah.
And the developer paid for a lot of that work. So
Okay.
there's all kinds of, is that correct?
That's correct.
Turn around, you do, if the more infrastructure the city fronts. You design the SDC model to get it back.
Right, but then we discount the middle housing SDC and a few of the other, like if we're.
We won't have to do that.
Okay, no, whatever the model is, you say these are being the costs, you recover the cost.
Yeah.
And then you recover the cost when development occurs. And then it's up to property owners if they are interested in selling to be developed or develop themselves.
Is there a maximum area that can be master planned?
That's what it says.
Not that I'm aware of.
1,200
there's
acres
actually-
actually master plan.
Well, right.
Great segue. So, where are we gonna do this master plan area? And what are we really talking about? In short story, it's up to you guys. It's up to council. What do you guys want to do? Areas that might make sense, I think, are more of our residential zones, of course, because we're really focused on the HB 2001. So our residential zones make sense. Areas that are mixed, residential, commercial, and just our mixed use zones, I think would all make sense. So here's just two examples. It could be, in the concept plan, we've delineated different planning areas, the West District on the left. I think that'd be a great area for a master plan. community because you have the high school there, you have a lot of smaller different zones mixed in with each other. You have the park, you have Chicken Creek Greenway, all of those would be elements that I want to capture, as part of a master plan.
Does it have to be contiguous
All of the land have to be contiguous?
for the master planned area?
Don't know the answer to that.
The reason I ask is there's also property up off of E and Elwood on the northwest side corner.
Oh, the square.
The square that already has, there's sewer there, there's water, the infrastructure is there, ready to go.
But we also don't necessarily need. The master plan that one.
It doesn't say it has to be contiguous. The definition doesn't say that, but I suspect that they anticipated that it would be.
Yeah.
Could it- I mean, could we do 2 master planned areas if we say, hey, we want to do this and this?
Yep, yes.
Okay,
Share this them together, we're good at that.
That's why I was asking. If it's contiguous.
I mean, those two areas are contiguous if you wanted to combine that into one. Well, those are, but yeah, I know you're talking about that kitty corner from the top right there on the left. And then
And so these are just examples of areas that might make sense for a master plan. Could be larger, could be smaller, but these are the areas that I think, would make sense. I think we're gonna leave master planning now, so.
yeah, I mean, I could see potentially, like, if we didn't want to be this ambitious, like shrinking down and. Like on the right hand side, when you leave out the hospitality, low residential and other hospitality, kind of leave it to the center core. I mean, not saying it's still not a hospitality zone, just saying it doesn't necessarily have to be in the master plan.
Sure.
And on the other one, you could do the same thing with kind of that low density on the left, right? You could carve that out a little bit and do that more traditional development and kind of focus on the
Putting them up
kind of the
together.
higher, the commercial mixed use. Middle housing stuff up closer to the high school area and kind of, I'm not suggesting that's what I want, I'm just throwing that out.
Yes, absolutely. No, and it's up to you guys, larger, smaller.
If the city does the master plan, right, then that doesn't necessarily mean it all develops at once. It's still, people have to, someone has to decide to sell their property. The master plan in this place, they apply to get annexed and
Absolutely.
you're off and running.
Any other questions on master planning?
and if. Years go by and we find nobody's able to do it, we can just adjust the master plan as a council too, right?
Of course, yeah.
It's not
Incentives.
that simple,
Okay,
there is it is a process. So if we turn around, it's paperwork and making sure that the master plan still reflects whatever requirements are placed upon us by Metro or the state.
Right.
And
Let's hope that's not.
It's a process, just like this is gonna be.
yeah,
I mean, it's a couple years, 3 to 5 years, probably.
suggesting a master plan sounds like it is less work than a UGB request. I mean, it feels like that's once every 6 years or 8 years and we gotta get a lot of things in line or do both. Well, I understand, but what I'm saying is that it's a process, but it's not an act of legislation that we have to do, right? It is.
Well,
it's still an act of legislation, depends on which legislation you're talking about. It's a local legislation.
Yeah.
Metro, it's probably a metro concurrence of the legislation.
Oh, okay.
I don't think we should go into this thinking we want to undo it. Like,
Again, I'm just looking at the worst case scenario. We do a terrible master plan, the developers hate, the people, and we can change it, right? We're not locked in, and so the worst case scenario of master planning is, oh, we made a mistake, we've wasted some money, let's fix it, right?
As we're master planning, we're getting some input.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, the best possible plan is we get, like you said, we get exactly what we'd always hoped and dreamed, right?
And so I think if we're gonna go down this road, I think we need to actually meet with some developers.
Yeah.
Put it in feedback and.
Yeah, 100%.
It'll be a very small process.
Yeah.
The master planning will, property owners, developers,
Yeah.
Metro, everyone's gonna, it'll be a different process than the concept plan, much more detail, right? Like Carrie mentioned, we're gonna get into environmental and everything in a lot more detail. Than the concept plan phase would be the main difference. But yes.
But I think the reason we're talking about master planning now is it a tool to help us manage the look and feel of the growth?
Yeah.
The housing we're getting there. And that's the lens I have for all this at this point. Is this, and that's why I brought up the contiguous question in the other property area, even though it's smaller. Is this a tool to help us manage?
bring that in,
growth? Yeah.
Well, and I go back, I always use a lot of example, because I remember going out there before they had even put a shovel in the ground. And I saw their master plan presentation, and now fast forward, I don't know, 25 years. It looks exactly like the master plan that was, I mean. Exactly within, as close as exactly can be, but like, every park is exactly where it was planned to be, every road, every amenity, like.
I mean, they didn't get to the end of it and realize they didn't have a place for a park?
No. And so that is what, and I'm very encouraged by what I've heard tonight, because these are the questions I've been asking you all for like a year now, is like how. With the new rules, can we still have that level of certainty, like within, you know, as much as certainty can be, and it sounds like we can.
And we don't have to
Very exciting.
decide this till we get to the comprehensive plan stage?
Correct.
Okay.
This is to help you in the decision making.
Okay.
For where
Yeah,
we're at.
just understanding what tools.
Yep.
We'll have.
Thank you.
It's helpful, thank you.
And then just going back to the annexation policy, you know, so right now we do have annexation policy in the comprehensive plan, talks about in the Brookman area, you know, we will approve annexations if they meet this, you know, this and that criteria. There's Metro Code that governs annexations that we demonstrate compliance with, and then of course, state law. We can, as we mentioned, adopt new annexation and actually put it in the development code is what we would recommend. So right now it's in the comprehensive plan, which is fine. We probably double down on that and get more annexation policy in the comp plan. But it'd be, I think, prudent to also put it in the development code and have a little bit more teeth behind it, a little more precise or more detail within the code. And then I think there's been, you know, questions and confusion around SB 1573 and exactly, you know, what that means for us being in the driver's seat. SB 1573 says that the city cannot require that the annexation goes to the voters if that annexation application follows this method, right? The SB 1573 has these criteria for approval, and if the developer comes there, the property owner comes in and says, I've met all the criteria, then we can't require that also to go to the voters. But the key is that we still have all the criteria that they have to comply with. Basically, SB 1573 says that the annexation complies with the policies of the city, you know, more or less. And you guys set those policies, so.
We must not have had those strong policies. At the time, Brookman, some of those got annexed in because they went against the vote of people and were able to annex in. So we must not have had those strong policies.
I think they could be strengthened and really, you know, I think they could be strengthened, yes, but you know, annexations come to you guys as a type 5 public hearing, usually 2 hearings, and you know, we have the criteria there.
But no, we have no ability to say no to them.
It'd be difficult to say no to them. It'd be
Yeah.
difficult under the current code.
If
Yeah,
they
under the current
meet
code.
those. Under the criteria.
Under the current code. I mean, I think, you know, yeah, there could, you know, if you guys get if you guys get an annexation that concerns you, let us know, even under the current policy.
So what's the scope of provisions in code that we can have in an annexation agreement? Like, I'm assuming I'm just making this up, I'm not proposing this, but we can't have an annexation agreement that says you'll only build single family detached. But I mean, I'm trying to understand what kind of scope of control do we have?
So let me start with maybe some of the more common things that I think you guys will like. We can require as part of the annexation code that the property owner and city come to an agreement, have an annexation agreement. And that's the terms of that agreement are negotiated. Could be around park dedication and park space. It could be around infrastructure, provision of infrastructure. The one that I really like from the example that we have is, you know, the developer agrees, and it's in the annexation agreement that they can't develop more than what their transportation analysis shows, and they do the transportation analysis as part of prior to the annexation agreement, probably higher level, but it will say, you know, development cannot go beyond the capacity of the TIA, right? So it could constrain the amount of, you know, development within that parcel, for example, based on the TIA.
Unless the network's improved.
Correct. Exactly, unless they provide it, or unless they want to wait and the capital comes through or whatever. So we can, you know, actually require planning, studies as part of that and prior to getting to the annexation agreement. So I think that's a very valuable tool that we don't require right now that we could require for Sherwood West.
And you say you have a draft.
We have a crossing. Yeah, it's in the packet.
And it seems to me, maybe I'm on pace here, but if we went down the like master plan route. Wouldn't necessarily need as much the annexation policies because the master plan would potentially cover a lot of the things you might be concerned about. I mean, they're not saying we still wouldn't have one, right? But like, I don't think we need to have a really strong master plan and then also these like super strong annexation policies, because I think it becomes duplicative in some ways, but am I off base there?
Yeah, I think I'd probably recommend both.
I'm saying we need both. I'm just saying like,
I think the main
if we
thing,
don't do a master plan, and then our annexation policy may need more of the stuff you're talking about. But if we're doing a master plan, a lot of the studies are gonna be in master plan, we don't need to also have them in the annexation agreement necessarily.
if there is overlap, certainly we don't have to duplicate. The annexation policy is going to get you things that the master plan doesn't though.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
And plus, there might be areas in Sherwood West that aren't gonna be master plan
Right.
that we want, yeah, okay.
Again, I'm not saying either
There
or.
could be a fair amount of time that passes between the two too.
It's about, right, if you. Just master plan it, and then boom, all the residential gets done and all the jobs get built. There's at least one person around this table will be really fucking pissed. That's me.
Noted.
Some of us could mildly annoyed.
But if we master plan something as a council, aren't we saying we want this to be built? And so it feels like we should also say, make it as easy as possible to build that vision.
Agreed.
Right? We're not trying to set up extra,
Right.
We're not trying to say, hey, we're gonna make you jump through these hoops to build our master plan. And we're gonna make it hurdles for you to, and so I think I'm okay with.
I think that's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
I think you said it better way.
But the purpose of the tools is to make sure that we have a master plan that gets built the way.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but I just want to be real clear.
At
that
a
either
paid
developer-
maximum pace.
Yeah, it's not about, if we all agree to it, it's not about making a bureaucratic nightmare for the developers, we're gonna make it easy. Just make sure that we're not getting what we didn't bargain for.
100%. Yeah, I just was wanting to state it because I think that we're on the same page on that. I was making sure it wasn't a.
And we also have to keep in mind the timeframes we're thinking about.
Oh, yeah.
Sherwood West is how many years are we into? What's that supposed to be, our 50-year supply of land, so. I don't think anyone's expectation that it all goes right away, but we do want to get ahead of it from a planning point of view.
Is master planning typically residential only, or does it include
It can include,
the other
it can include
things as
other.
well?
I think it would be, if you're gonna go with the third option of master planning where you've got. Because you have other types of zoning, you get a pass. The more other types of zoning you have within the boundaries, the stronger your pass is, it seems to me. So in other words, if you have some zones that allow multifamily. That's another type of housing. And that would qualify. So if you're gonna have a mixed use zone, like if your hospitality zone has mixed use in it. Then you got extra reinforcement to your justification for not allowing middle housing in your single family zone. Because you got it covered. In other words, you're accommodating all the different types, you're not missing any. But if you just did a little residential area, I think that would be a harder case to make.
Well, the purpose of my
Go ahead.
purpose of my question was because we're also talking industrial in jobs, so can we master plan out that way as well? Or is that,
There's no prohibition to including it. I'm not sure what it adds for purposes of middle housing, but.
Yeah, that might be.
I mean, I think if you look at the west,
Let's
and
go.
the two zones you had,
Where we address.
I think the two areas you had make the most sense because especially that area around the high school, the concept plan has multifamily, it has mixed use. It has middle housing, it has cottage, it has every single zone that you could imagine that would include every type of residential.
I think we can, in terms of the mixed employment zone we have in the north, I think the development code would be good to address to make sure we're getting compatible development. We could do that through the development code. The other concern there would be timeline, is if we did a master plan for there, it's gonna slow down. It's
Gotcha.
gonna slow that down, so we probably don't want to do that.
Thank you.
So the just on the annexation agreements, does that survive change of property ownership? You know, I'm thinking. through the
Yes,
scenarios.
it is typically recorded.
Okay, so that would be important. I think,
Absolutely.
like in 2008, when we had so many projects start and we had the housing bubble burst, and there was companies that just went out of business and properties, half-built houses sat around for years. And the new owners come in and want to do so. I just want to make sure that all survives. So, or, you know, you could have shenanigans of someone bringing it under one name and then selling
Timeframe.
There's a 10-year.
10-year timeframe.
For what, the annexation?
Annexation
Okay.
agreement.
Development agreements have a 10-year,
Property regardless of who the owner is.
but they only live for 10 years.
Okay.
And if somebody doesn't do all the things in the annexation agreement within 10 years, you can't kick them back out of the city. They're in.
Okay.
And is that really the only crowbar
What do you mean?
in terms of, or clawback, you know, if they don't.
We said we cannot.
You cannot kick them out of the city.
Even before.
Once something's annexed, it's in.
Okay.
What would the remedy be? Some sort of a civil rental?
There would be a civil breach of contract. I think, I've never seen that happen. Nobody's gonna negotiate an annexation agreement if they're not really very serious, because it's gonna have very specific terms. I mean, other than the Great Recession,
Right.
you know,
Yeah,
Which-
that's why I used that example.
but other than that, I think, but it is the case often that you have an LLC created that, owns the land, annexes the land, and moves to a different LLC that develops the land. So that's why run with the land is really important, not in the, you know.
I want to answer your question specifically on could an annexation agreement require single family only? I think the answer is not clear. I think that the best path, and Carrie, I'm not going to speak for Carrie, she can weigh in on this. The best path to try and get what we're looking for in staff's mind is through the master planning process, right? That's the safest way.
And I don't ask that question because I have that goal. I'm just
Sure.
testing the limits of what we.
No, I think it's great. I think it's good.
I think that I mean, so where we are right now, House Bill 2001 says that local governments must allow the development of middle housing, right? And then it says, as an alternative to that, you can do master plan communities. What it doesn't say is an alternative, third alternative would be if a owner agrees not to exercise those rights. And it seems to me that because the statute doesn't say that an owner should be able to. I mean, individuals decide not to exercise certain rights that they have for lots of reasons. And they're bound by those choices. For example, if you run for district attorney, you agree to give up certain First Amendment rights because you're district attorney. That's just, so it fits that kind of analogy. But you all know all tides run towards housing right now, and anything like that would smell at all like an effort to constrain choices would be a difficult case to win if the politics and the playing field looks exactly like it does today. So the answer to that question is, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, and again, I'm not asking because I'm proposing that idea. I probably wouldn't, but I'm just trying to understand what the limits are.
I think you also ask about PUDs.
Right.
You know, and a PUD is when the developer comes after you got the code in place and they ask for an alternative track, right? They don't want to go the clear and objective track. They want to go the alternative track. They want to do something creative, and you all have criteria that would allow for discretionary review. Could that say you'll only do single family and duplexes, for example, and not triplexes and fourplexes? That, now, again, I think the answer to that is, I don't know. But Because the statute, the middle housing the middle housing statute and rule doesn't say anything about alternative track choices that applicants may make.
Interesting. So variation in the question, hypothetical, say you have a PUD you've already approved. And now a developer comes in and says, you know, I know we said we were only gonna do this type of housing, but under HB 2001, we've changed our mind, we're gonna do this. Is it which applies, which trumps?
I think middle housing trumps,
So even.
but I understand it hasn't been tested. But I think middle housing trumps.
Yeah, I want to be clear with you that some of it just hasn't been played out in the courts and hasn't been tested, so yeah, I want to just be clear with that and.
So master planning gives us more ability than even.
The rule says right now, master planning is exempt. And I don't have that in any of the other scenarios that you've thrown out.
It's the surefire way. It's up, it's in the code. It's been adopted by the state. So there is a clear path, you know, I think to get most of what we want.
Super helpful.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
That's it.
Any other questions?
You guys, yeah, any other, so we have the next work session November 7th. And we're happy to do this again. If you guys are looking for more info, happy to get it on conversation. Remind me of.
I'm sorry, what am I saying?
Hospitality.
There's something specific.
Well, just,
You know, we'll create that zone that. What are the potential?
Can the city create that zone?
yeah, and
What are the considerations?
partner agencies think, you know, all this stuff.
I think what we're trying to avoid is it, we creating a hospitality zone and having someone build a commercial center there or. A warehouse or, you know, something beyond, like we've had suggestions that we'll just do an overlay on the commercial zone, but that would allow. You know, so how do we
Truly get a hospitality zone in a way that we're gonna have partnership from the other agencies.
And if we define what a hospitality zone is,
You mean the other, you mean,
Right now, it's kind of like we know it when we see it, but I think we do need to define it.
yeah, I mean, I can envision what that means, but do we have a definition?
Picture hotels.
I don't think we did as part of the concept. We didn't as part of the concept.
Yeah,
But
hotels,
we would-
restaurants, yeah,
Yeah.
Event center.
yeah. but-
And
An event center.
we're potentially, that's I'm about to say, you know, potentially a master plan for the hospitality zone.
Yeah, I'd be curious to look around the country and the area and see if there's any examples, but you know, I'm not averse to being a pioneer, but I also like having. Something that's worked somewhere that we can go from.
Sure. But I'll just say, I've spoken to a few people, Bruce and I and Keith have been talking with people and, you know, getting some feedback, on the hospitality zone. A lot of support for it so far is what we've heard. Even the planners at Metro, so that's a great, not to speak for Metro, but in funding this asset, they'd love to work on it as a consultant. We've been talking with others who are in the industry. Just excited, people are just excited about it. And, you know, there's been some good energy when we've talked about this zone, so.
Well, I think something you just said, right, if that's a separate master plan zone, and then it includes residential, it includes, you know, certain types of, like, I look at it as like, you could have this really cool kind of mixed use, kind of downtown-y kind of zone. I've been to other towns that have these kind of developments there. I was just in Coeur d'Alene and they have one there that kind of, I'm thinking of, right, there's hotels, restaurants, shopping, you know, living above shopping. It's really cool. I think there's a lot of, I think something like that could be really exciting. Yeah. Love to partner with people on that too.
Well, thank you so much.
Very helpful.
For using this is awesome. Thank you for coming out today.
Sure, happy to do it.
We're gonna move on to our second item on the work session. Chief Hanlon's here, talk about policy.
Don't take it personally that everyone's leaving. All right, I'll see you all.
No fun.
All right. It's nice for you to show up. It's been a couple of months, I think.
Oh, I think we only see Dana these days.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, Dan's got his own like click hard now because he's here all the time. Fine.
Is it hunting season?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was archery.
What do you think? Or did you get it?
Oh, and then it'll be hunting season.
Yeah.
It'll be fishing.
did okay, yeah, so.
Okay.
That is fair.
No,
All right. Yeah.
want to excuse myself. I had to pull it one day.
You traveled today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got in this early afternoon.
Oh,
Time is it usually right now?
3
Yeah, go.
in the morning.
Yeah, you're good. Thanks for coming.
Good night.
I'm fully supportive.
I've been skipping meetings.
All right.
Okay.
On to item 2, Keith, do you want to lead us or do you want to just kick right to the chief here?
I think the chief is ready to take this on and handle it. So I talked to him today and he said he's ready to go. So I will turn it over to Chief Hanlon and let him go over the policies.
All right, chief, just take it away.
So thank you. Hopefully you guys read all 130 pages of fun, and I apologize for the extensive policy update. It's been a long time coming just with a lot of the changes. And as you probably noticed, a lot of it was legislative driven. As a matter of fact, everything that was in there, all the changes were recommendations and from Lexipol, who writes our policy manual and or just legislative mandates that we're required to follow. So nothing nothing from our end in our policy changed there. But I did want to just highlight some of the different ones that are probably pretty important. And I appreciate you taking the time to do this. This is a new way of doing it. If you've been around, you know, we sat there and read every one during council. So changing it up to see if this may be a better flow for us to have a conversation about it and not, quite frankly, take up council time and a council meeting to go through it and let you guys review it at your leisure. But some of the bigger ones, if you recall, is 303.7 was crowd control. That was a big thing that came out just because of all the riots over the last few years and what that meant and how we deploy and what we do. I'll tell you, obviously, we don't have a crowd control team in Sherwood. We rely on Washington County's team to come out if in fact there's an incident where we need that kind of crowd control. And then they oversee the scene and they manage the deployment of tear gas and those kind of things that, quite frankly, takes it out of our hands if in fact we have to elevate to that. So right now, our only tools that we use in less lethal are our 40 millimeter rounds, the big blue, I call them styrofoam balls and or our tasers. So that one was pretty straightforward. You saw a big policy thing with the wellness program. Because obviously that's the big talking point across the nation is wellness programs within law enforcement and first responders. Yeah, long time coming. And so they've, thankfully, we're way ahead of the curve. So a lot of what they want to do, we were already doing. And if you saw in that, they were mishmashing and trying to combine a lot of things. And you saw a lot of things being struck out and then reallocated into another policy. So nothing new there. I like what they're doing. It's everything that we're doing. So I think it's a great tool that's now going to be in our policy and that Lexipol's a part of. So that went well. Vehicle pursuits, nothing was changed in that. It just moved again within the policy. And then briefings, they talked about that, how we do training. Oh, yeah, sorry.
So I apologize. So did the state have legislation that mandated how we handle vehicle pursuits?
No. So
because we had already put some pretty good rules in place. On
yeah,
that.
so we didn't change any of that. It just moved around in there. And then the briefing, one of the things that came up was the things that can occur during briefing, which we've done for years, a lot of training, a lot of the small minutia stuff that we have to mandate or update on, we can knock out in 15, 30 minutes in a briefing. So that was really that one. Yes.
And I apologize, but just for people listening, could you just explain what our vehicle pursuit policy is?
Oh, it's huge.
In general terms.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's pretty restrictive. Obviously, we're not going to pursue anybody unless we really believe they're a major threat to us or members in society, robbery, murder suspects, those kind of things. If we know who they are or they're minor, you know, we're not going to put the community at large at risk. We'll catch them later. Technology's been our friend. Radios are our friend. So we have better ways than pursuing them at high rates of speed. Obviously, time, place, and manner all kind of play into those decisions. So don't want it to be so restrictive because as we've seen, people are catching on and they just run.
Right.
So the flip side of that is they run and they still crash into people. Because they just think it's fun to do. So they're actually taking more risks nowadays and running from us than they would have previously. So it's this weird double-edged sword that, but for our sake, our liability, we're pretty restrictive on that. I mean, if you have a tail light out and you take off, we're not chasing you. If you stole something from Walmart, we're not chasing
I
you.
had a community member ask me about it, so I thought.
Yes, so.
But you are tacking on a charge when you catch them later though, right?
Yeah, if we need, oh, absolutely, yeah, and we've done that several times, when we'll catch up, hopefully, I mean, there's a lot of times we just don't. Yeah, that's the reality of it, it's a stolen car and we don't know who they are.
Yeah.
Or we don't have a good description and we're not willing to chase them. I mean, the exception is, and we had it here, somebody going down 99 the wrong way. That was one of our rare cases where that individual was running into police cars in different counties and really causing a lot of danger to the community. And so we were willing to do what we needed to do to stop him. So a lot of case by case, but generally.
You can't outrun Motorola.
No, you can't. No. Airplanes, technology, like I said, is pretty cool. One of the things that came up in the police advisory board is the term excited delirium. It was in our policy, how we would describe an individual when we were dealing with them, and it was pretty vague. And so they changed that and they updated it to give some more descriptive information, just to describe behaviors and symptoms, when we're dealing with the mental health component of people, rather than just using this all-inclusive term. We're using more descriptive behaviors so that, if we need to arrest them or if we need to divert them to another place versus the jail or arrest, we have some of those things, especially with POHs. And the mental health response team is really, sorry, police officer hold, thank you for correcting me or helping with the acronyms.
I didn't even know that one. So I was like,
So police officer hold is when we go on a call where there's a mental health component and they're a risk to the community or more so themselves. We have the authority to take them to a care facility, the hospital, and then they can be evaluated and hopefully get the care they need. So towing, nothing's changed there. We're under the Washington County tow policy of when we tow, how we tow, who tows, how we collect evidence, how we inventory vehicles. A lot of this has been in play for a number of years, just some tweaking within the policy of where it's at. One of the legislative ones was the investigation and prosecution involving juveniles. This has been in play for several months now, which we're following. It's just how we interview juveniles and the scenarios, whether it's schools or homes or just out on the street, just what we need to do when we talk to them. So I'm sorry.
Can you elaborate what that is?
Oh, yeah, so it's where we can talk to them, how we can talk to them, the questions we can ask, the environment that we set them up in. As far as, do they have an exit? Are we contacting, depending on what's going on, are we contacting parents? We don't want to make them feel compelled to answer questions because they're sitting there talking to the police officers. I think there was an argument that they don't have that development yet to know exactly what the consequences are when they're answering questions and putting themselves in situations. So it's really just putting in safety mechanisms to ensure that they have all the rights afforded to them when we're out there dealing with them.
And is there the other problem though, when you will need to question them about potentially what's going on with their parents, right? If there's an abuse situation or where you are separating them so that you can, because they may not be answering honestly, the person abusing them standing right there, right?
And they go to cares, when you use cares for stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother world. That's, physical abuse, sexual abuse. Yeah, that we have, that's a whole nother track that we follow with, you're right, because somebody who's standing in the room with a potential abuser is not going to say,
Yeah.
They're doing this to me. Yes, to your point, yeah, we would separate them and have those conversations. And then one of the last ones, I think one of the bigger ones that came out was personnel complaints. Last year, no, this year, started this year. I'm blending them all together. New rule came out for presumptive sanctions for certain types of misconduct. So basically it's tightening, which is good. I think it's just holding us to a higher standard. So there's certain things that if they do, there's a presumptive, I was gonna say a fine, that's not presumptive sanction. And then obviously that works back through depending on, you know, the totality of the circumstances, but there's 7, I believe, that, you know, misconduct, obviously sexual stuff, all the big hitters, but I think it's good. It's cleaned it up. It's, you know, it's making sure that, and I think one of this came out and there was an agency close to here that would, you know, put people out on leave because of some pretty egregious behavior. And then they were able to fight their way back in through the associations and unions to get their job back. And I think a lot of this was drove this to ensure that if you do something wrong, especially criminally in law enforcement, you're going to be held accountable and you're not going to be necessarily fight your way back into your job through the associations. They're an important part of obviously the labor, but it just gives us more credibility, which I think is not a bad thing. And the rest of it. So one of the things that comes out of these things is when we get this is you have major, critical and minor updates. A lot of them, it can just be citations, you know, commas, grammatical stuff, changing. Yeah, just they're always going through it and scrubbing it to make sure it's up to date and clean. And so obviously I'm not going to bore you with all of those commas and things, but these were the big ones that I thought were important. Obviously, they're our biggest liability for us when we're out there doing the job. And with that, I will leave it or open it up for questions.
Any questions?
You have any input, Ryan?
No, it's good to see you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, the only personnel complaint I've gotten is that our chief disappeared for a couple months.
It wasn't months.
It's just that we just missed you. It felt so long.
I came back for Deb's retirement.
That was great ceremony, by the way.
Yeah, that was.
I think Dan has a question.
I have a
We're all chit-chatting.
couple questions. In section 300.10, the use of force analysis, it dictates that a yearly analysis report will be done. Is that made public or who sees that report?
We don't make it public. It's a part of our accreditation.
Okay.
So it's reviewed. I mean, so anytime we have a use of force, that's whether we pull a taser out and point it at somebody, whether we draw our weapon.
Even if you don't fire the taser.
If I draw my weapon because I believe you're a bad guy and you've been described as a bad guy with a gun or with and I draw my gun, I don't ever point it at you, it's still a use of force. And then from there, whatever escalates from that is, but we write reports on that. This is why we did it. This was the reason we did it. And then those were reviewed. They were reviewed from the supervisor to the captains and I review it at the very end. And then those are all kept. And then, like I said, at the end of the year or during our accreditation stuff, we turn all that in to make sure that we're up to speed and that we're following our policies and that. But to answer your question, no, we don't make that public. Quite frankly, I've never thought about it.
Is accreditation annually?
It's, yeah, every year we have to meet all these benchmarks. It's every 3 years that they come through and give us
We submit the reports every year, but it's a 3-year.
Yeah, at the end of the 3 years, we get the A years.
Okay.
So subject to the Freedom of Information Act, I mean, could somebody?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, if somebody wanted to know, I mean, our use of force is very, very minimal. I'm giving you I'm giving you the how deep in the weeds we go just to document, just even if we do something.
Roughly how many do we have a year?
of the kind I described.
Any, like what the total number of use of force and.
Oh, shit, I don't know. Close to 100.
Okay.
I mean, when you talk about this,
Sure.
yeah, I mean, that kind of thing. Now, serious hands-on, maybe it doesn't. I mean, we're literally had to have tased somebody or had to take somebody to the ground, a fight. I mean, you've seen some of the stuff and, you know, a lot of thefts, but
You agree that would, I mean, that would be somebody could request that?
So,
I saw you had a look on your face, so I'm just
No,
clarifying.
well, Sylvia is the first stop for that, and then they come to me.
Yeah.
But so it would be in Oregon Public Records request. FOIA is the federal side of it. So,
Okay.
but yeah, so if somebody submitted a public records request, probably a decent portion of that I would scrub. You know, obviously,
Any
right, and we
names
would want to give them the general information without providing sensitive information, maybe about a personnel file or something like that, right? So a lot of it depends on how it's phrased, and I take a strict interpretation of that. Obviously, the goal is to have an informed citizenry. We want that.
Yeah.
We want accountability. That's important, but I also want to protect the city as best we can. So if that's an issue, they appeal it to the attorney.
Yeah, no, it's more like if he pointed a taser at me, can I go to the city and say, I want to find out why he did, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I mean, so that's a complex question, and a lot of the times people will say, I want the body cam video. Generally, I don't release body cam video because there's a specific statute that says there needs to be a pretty good reason to release
Okay,
body cam
alright.
video. So,
It might be interesting to see
I just had a.
like summary information of that every once in a while. I don't know if anybody else agrees with me, but like. We had 97 use of force engagements, you know, 80 of them were pointing a taser at somebody that never escalated. Yeah, like summary information.
Well,
But
that's what
I don't know.
This report
It's kind of
excludes the
interesting.
names and officers and.
Yeah, I don't want any of that. I don't want.
So it seemed like it was
summary
available
aggregated.
for the public.
and there's no specific requirement under Oregon records law to compile a list. So if we don't have that information on a list, we have no duty to say, hey, let's put
Yeah,
something together.
this specifically does say that annually, we need to have a report that lists
Got
every
it,
single
okay.
one, not including names, officers, case numbers. So
don't
that's
know.
why I was curious if it was a public, because all of that is already scrubbed, or if it just is internal.
it's all internal. It's all, like I said, we review it, all goes into a person, or not personnel file, it just goes into a use of force file. And so none of that goes out.
I haven't ever seen one of those come through.
No, because it doesn't, none of it goes.
But it seems like this report specifically says to compile it annually, but not to include officer names, case numbers, da, da, da. So is the one you comply with that? Okay, so that seems like it's pretty much already scrubbed, but yeah.
Probably could, yeah. So I mean, and it'd be a case by case, depending on the requester language and what they wanted. So, and you know, if we ever did deny something, you know, my answer is not final, right? Kevin Barton, our district attorney, gets to make a call and say, hey, Ryan, I think maybe you misread this here, and Kevin can make a decision whether or not to release it or tell us to. If I don't like his decision, we can have a different conversation about that.
I mean, I have no issue with people seeing that report,
Yeah.
but also I think context is really.
That's why I
Exactly.
think we want the aggregated number.
Well, but the context is important too, because, okay, we had 100. I mean, how do we compare to other agencies? Is that good? Is that bad? I mean, it's by itself, I mean, you've been doing it long enough to know, right? But
It's,
Yeah.
Oh my God, 100 use of force incidents, that's insane.
For our small city.
that's,
But I don't see that, what you just described as use of force.
that's where the rub is, because we call it that.
Exactly.
Yeah, when it's really not.
Yeah.
It's, so it
And the report hopefully is very clear on.
it is
Wrong, but not used or whatever.
It is very clear. I mean, I just read one this morning, you know, it was a burglary suspect with a canine. And they came around and he just giving commands because of this individual was at high risk, drew his weapon and what we call a low ready, you know, down at the ground. And the guy complied, the gun went back in the holster. It's a use of force. Never touched anybody.
would it be a use of force if it was just the dog?
Yes.
So you-
Yep,
yeah,
every
that
dog
seems-
deployment is a use of force report.
Yeah.
Reports won't be that often.
So that's where it kind of,
Yeah.
you know, people could be like, oh, it's crazy, but it's really not. We're just probably to your point, I mean, we're just being a little bit more transparent. This is what it is and this is why we do it. And we have nothing to hide. I mean.
I like that.
So-
You probably record
so-
more than, you know, maybe the average, so.
So Dan, did you have another question?
Oh, yeah, I have a few more. In section 305.10.1, the entire section is crossed out, but we still have the number there. Do we need that as a placeholder?
I don't know which one that is.
Like for that kind of stuff, is this what we can bring up in this, or is that somewhere different where I should?
You said 300 point what?
0.10.1
That's a good question. I probably just looked over it because it wasn't anything. I'll have to look for it.
It's on page 9 of that section. 24 of the PDF, but that doesn't help you.
Oh, 20, yeah. That's page 9 of 300.
300, yes.
310 use of force analysis.
Yeah, it's the critical incident stress debriefing of officer and shootings and deaths.
Oh, that moved.
Right, but we still have the number in that section but there's nothing for that number now.
Yeah, that would have probably just been an error that it didn't get removed because that moved all into the wellness component.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then I noticed that a lot of the he, she's got changed to the officer for language in the policy now. There's a couple that are still in there that I found. I don't know if you're wanting.
Sure. Geez, if you found, I'll take them.
At the beginning of it, page 6, use of force, section 300.5,
Uh-huh.
and then section 413.4,
I'm sorry, what?
413.4.
Okay.
Those are the only two that I saw for that. And then section 502.3.1, there's no spaces after the number, just for aesthetics.
Okay.
That's a shot.
Wow. Yeah. These are what I didn't want to bore you with.
Where were you when I was writing your term paper?
Yeah. No kidding.
So,
Big deal.
any other questions?
Good.
On the crowd control, one, is there I didn't see, is there a definition of crowd? Like, when does it become? Control?
There is, yeah, so it actually,
Yeah.
it actually, what it changes to is determined as a riot.
Yeah,
I think is the new terminology for that.
so this is not Robin Festival,
No,
right? This is, I mean, that's crowd.
so this is an angry, so I'll give you the most recent Tiger. 3 years ago, they had I think it was Antifa or
Yeah.
BLM or maybe a combination thereof. Showed up and started going down their Old Town Strip and bashing out windows and cars and a lot of criminal stuff. Now, you take what we had here in 2021 with the issue at the school district. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we had Proud Boys, I believe, on one side and BLM on the other. That's not a riot. That was fine, but
People yelling at each other.
yeah, and nobody was breaking anything. So in this all kicks in if all of a sudden they just, becomes a total melee and destruction of property and lots of criminal activities occur. And then it flips to that riot thing. And at that point, that's when I hate to say this, we step away and let this, obviously the crowd control team step in and determine next steps to deal with that. So as you know, 2-3 people working at a time are not going to
You can
take that on.
Right. Any other questions?
It's interesting you talk about crowd control.
I just know that.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys heard on this end that there were all these riots in Bogota.
Oh, no.
The riots and marches in Bogota. And then depending where I was at, I was on the southwest side of the country. And depending on who you talk to, it's this mass riot and everything. When you get down there, and we actually went into it. We actually were in Bogota, and it was this peaceful gathering of people. So it's however it gets cast. But it is.
It changed, like, go back to the Portland stuff.
Yeah.
Years ago, like in the daytime and early evening, they were pretty calm and peaceful, and then as it turned to dark, they got less common, less peaceful, and it was actually a different, it was like the set of people.
Changing of the card, yeah.
Right, but yeah.
It was just interesting to be a part of that, and that becomes national news, right? And being right in the middle of it. But even being right in the middle of it and hearing different sides,
Yeah.
but experiencing it. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, I get it.
I just found it fascinating.
It is, yeah.
So remind me of our policy that we set a few years ago. Does this now need to come on the consent agenda? Okay.
So I'll do that. I'll set that as long as there is no questions. I guess the last question I have for you, is this a good way to do it?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's great.
Is this better
This
than,
is
so you can see it all in its.
No, I think it's how
totality?
to answer questions, and it's from the dais up there, it's hard to have these conversations. I guess my question for the rest of, if there's no more questions, would be are we okay just putting this on the consent agenda?
I am.
Yes, okay.
I just have one, more. As far as who again is involved with updating this? You mentioned that the safety committee.
Police advisory board.
Or police advisory gave.
So when we get these, Lex Bowl will send them out, kind of compile them, and then I'll just take them to the police advisory board and say, these are the updated changes that are recommended. They review them, we have the same kind of conversation. And then as long as they're good with it and approve it, then I'll bring it to you like in this format, and then we'll take it to consent agenda.
Like the police advisory board doesn't help craft any of the policy or anything. I mean, most of it anyway is required due to state statute typically.
Yeah, I mean, it's the things that I change are, the tie or the color, or, I mean, the things I'm assuming you don't care about, and then in that way, but
Well, people care about black poles versus blue poles.
I don't know, we got no input on how to do police cars.
oh, speaking
I
of,
want to
yeah.
put on the police car.
But they look great.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so let's go on the consent agenda, and I think we are done, and.
Yeah, you get to get out of here.
Questions? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you,
All right.
Debbie. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, everyone.
See you again, Renee.